I'm Jessica Adams, 29, and I'll never forget that Thanksgiving dinner 3 years ago. Your sister deserves it, my father announced, raising his glass to toast Emma's new promotion. My mother nodded in agreement, beaming with pride as they announced they were giving Emma their vacation house in Florida, the one I'd been helping renovate for years. I sat frozen, the mashed potatoes turning cold on my plate, as decades of inequity crystallized in that moment. That night changed everything. What my family didn't know was that I had already set a plan in motion that would transform our lives forever. If you've ever felt the sting of family favoritism, you know exactly how I felt in that moment. Where are you watching from today? Drop it in the comments below. If my family drama resonates with you, hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of real stories. Now let me take you back to where it all began. Growing up in our spacious Connecticut home, I always knew something was off about how my parents treated me compared to my sister Emma. 4 years, my senior, Emma, somehow commanded attention that I could never seem to earn, no matter how hard I tried. My earliest memories are colored by this imbalance: Emma center stage, me in the wings. When Emma turned 8, my parents, Richard and Diana Adams, enrolled her in expensive ballet lessons with a renowned instructor in our affluent suburb. She wasn't particularly talented, but they spared no expense for costumes, private lessons, and elaborate recital celebrations. Meanwhile, I found solace in books from our local library, teaching myself to read above grade level. My parents barely noticed when my kindergarten teacher called to praise my exceptional reading abilities. Emma needs the extra attention, my mother would explain whenever I gathered the courage to ask why they missed my science fair, where I won first place. Especially after they'd rearranged their work schedules to attend Emma's mediocre ballet performance the week before. You're so self-sufficient, Jessica. You understand, don't you? I did understand, in the way children internalize painful truths as normal. I understood that Emma's room was decorated with custom pink wallpaper, canopy bed, and an expensive stereo system, while mine remained in the basic beige from when the house was purchased. I understood when Emma's 16th birthday meant a brand new car in the driveway with a giant red bow, while my 16th celebration was a quiet dinner at home with grocery store cake. What stung most was how unexceptional Emma was in almost every measurable way. She earned average grades with minimal effort. She quit most activities she started. She had trouble keeping friends due to her self-centered nature. Yet somehow, in my parents' eyes, she hung the moon and stars. I took the opposite approach. I became valedictorian of my high school class, earned a full scholarship to Princeton, joined every club, volunteered weekends, and maintained a perfect GPA. I became a master of people-pleasing, hoping anyone would notice my worth. My parents attended my high school graduation but left early to help Emma move into a new apartment after she'd been fired from her third job that year. Jessica always lands on her feet, my father would tell relatives, not as a compliment but as justification for why they didn't need to worry about me while they rescued Emma from one self-created crisis after another. My grandmother, Margaret, my mother's mother, was my saving grace. During summer visits to her modest home in Rhode Island, she would watch me with knowing eyes. "You know, Jessica," she said one evening as we baked cookies together when I was 15, "I see how hard you work. I see your kindness. I see you." Those 3 words, "I see you," were a balm to my parched soul. Grandmother Margaret never directly criticized her daughter's parenting, but she made sure I knew I was valued in her eyes. She attended my debate championships and piano recitals when my parents couldn't find the time. She kept a scrapbook of my achievements that still sits on her bookshelf. "Your parents mean well," she would say, "but sometimes people get locked into patterns they can't see." Her gentle wisdom helped me understand that my parents' behavior reflected their limitations, not my worth. Still, understanding didn't ease the pain. By 18, I had developed a steely determination to prove myself through achievement. When my acceptance letter from Princeton arrived with a full scholarship, my parents briefly acknowledged my accomplishment before quickly shifting the conversation to Emma's new boyfriend. I left for college with mixed emotions, relief to escape the constant comparison, but still yearning for the parental approval that remained frustratingly elusive. During holiday breaks, I'd return home hoping something had changed, that my academic success might finally earn me equal standing in the family. It never did. Emma's struggling to find her path, my mother explained when I discovered they had paid the security deposit and first 3 months' rent on yet another apartment for Emma after she'd been evicted. This was the same week they had declined to help me with the $200 textbook I needed, telling me I should learn financial independence. The pattern was set. Emma would stumble. My parents would catch her. I would soar, and they would barely look up. After graduating summa cum laude from Princeton, I secured a position as a junior financial analyst at a prestigious firm in Manhattan. The starting salary was modest by New York standards, but I budgeted carefully, shared an apartment with 2 roommates in Brooklyn, and gradually built my reputation in the industry. Meanwhile, Emma had cycled through 5 different careers in as many years: retail management, real estate, personal training, marketing, and event planning. None lasted more than 10 months. The 2008 financial crisis hit our family hard. My father's construction business faltered as projects were canceled. My mother's interior design clients tightened their belts. I received a tearful phone call from my mother explaining they were struggling to make mortgage payments. "Of course I'll help," I said, transferring $15,000 of my carefully saved emergency fund to their account the next day. I ate ramen noodles for months to rebuild my savings, but it was worth it to help my family. What I didn't know then was that they had also given Emma $22,000 that same month to pay off credit card debt she'd accumulated buying designer clothes and taking lavish vacations. I only discovered this years later when I accidentally saw a bank statement at their house. The $15,000 I lent them was never fully repaid. They returned $5,000 before, saying they couldn't manage more. I never asked for the rest. In 2012, Emma convinced my parents to invest $50,000 in her foolproof business idea, a luxury pet spa that closed within 6 months due to her mismanagement. They wrote it off as an unfortunate business risk. The same year, when I asked for their advice about possibly purchasing my apartment as the building went co-op, they said investing in New York real estate was too risky and I shouldn't take on more than I could handle. The Florida vacation home became another point of contention. My parents had purchased a modest 3-bedroom house near Naples in 2010 when prices bottomed out after the housing crisis. It needed significant renovations, which I helped with during weekend visits. For 3 years, I spent my limited vacation time painting walls, replacing fixtures, and landscaping the property while Emma visited only once for a weekend getaway with friends that left the newly renovated kitchen in disarray. "You're so good at this stuff, Jessica," my mother would say as I patched drywall or installed new cabinet pulls. "Emma just doesn't have your eye for detail." What went unspoken was that Emma also didn't have my willingness to put in the work, yet would likely enjoy the fruits of my labor. In 2015, I met Michael Sullivan, a kind and perceptive architect who noticed patterns in my family dynamic that I had normalized. "Do you realize you apologize when you talk about your accomplishments?" he asked after meeting my family for the first time at my parents' anniversary dinner. "And your parents interrupted you 3 times to praise your sister's new haircut." Michael's observations were gentle but eye-opening. With his encouragement, I started setting small boundaries, declining some weekend renovation requests, not immediately responding to financial crisis calls, and questioning the family narrative that Emma's needs were perpetually more urgent than mine. When I attempted to discuss the favoritism with my parents directly, their responses were textbook gaslighting. "You're being too sensitive," my father said. "We've always treated you girls exactly the same," my mother insisted, despite mountains of evidence to the contrary. "You're just jealous of your sister," they both concluded, dismissing my carefully presented examples. These conversations left me feeling crazy and questioning my own reality. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Nora Reed, who helped me understand the dynamics of golden child divided by scapegoat relationships and the way family systems resist change. "Your family has established an equilibrium," Dr. Reed explained. "When you challenge it by asserting your needs, they'll work hard to push you back into your assigned role." With therapy, I began to see my parents' behavior not as a reflection of my worth but as a reflection of their limitations. Still, understanding didn't heal the wound of watching Emma receive endless chances while I was expected to be perpetually self-sufficient. The summer before that fateful Thanksgiving, I discovered a folder in my father's home office while searching for tax forms he'd asked me to help with. Inside were bank statements documenting substantial gifts to Emma, $35,000 for a new car after she totaled her previous one driving while texting, $15,000 for a mental health retreat at a luxury spa, $10,000 for a career coaching program she abandoned after 2 sessions, and numerous smaller transfers of $1,000, $5,000 for various emergencies. When I questioned my mother about these gifts, she became defensive. "Emma has different needs than you," she said. "You've always been the strong one." My strength had become my curse, the justification for why I deserved less support, less attention, less investment. Meanwhile, Emma's helplessness was rewarded continuously, creating a perverse incentive structure where her irresponsibility earned her more family resources. "You need to understand," my mother added. "Your sister has always struggled with self-esteem. We're just trying to help her find her footing." Emma had perfected the art of the victim narrative. When confronted about her manipulative behavior, she would cry, claiming I was bullying her because I was jealous of how much our parents love me. She would remind everyone of her struggles with anxiety, self-diagnosed and conveniently appearing whenever she faced consequences, and how hard her life had been, despite every advantage. Through it all, my grandmother Margaret remained my touchstone. "Your parents are repeating patterns from their own upbringing," she told me during a private lunch. "Your mother was the Emma in her family. She's recreating what she knows." This insight helped me feel less personally rejected, though it didn't make the inequality easier to bear. By the fall of 2018, I had been promoted twice, maintained a healthy relationship with Michael, and built a life that reflected my values of responsibility and integrity. I had also come to the painful realization that the parental approval I had spent decades chasing would likely never arrive. My therapy sessions focused increasingly on acceptance rather than change. What I didn't know then was that Thanksgiving dinner would shatter even my modest expectations of fairness and catalyze a reckoning none of us saw coming. The 22nd of November 2018. The memory of that Thanksgiving remains vivid. The smell of roasting turkey, the sound of football on the television, the weight of anticipation as Michael and I drove to my parents' house in Connecticut. I had invited Michael to join my family's Thanksgiving for the first time, hoping his presence might help me navigate the familiar undercurrents of tension. "Remember," he said, squeezing my hand as we walked up the front path, "we can leave any time you want." From the moment we arrived, the atmosphere felt charged. My mother hugged Emma for a full minute while giving me a quick pat on the shoulder. My father poured Emma a generous glass of his expensive whiskey while directing Michael and me toward the open bottle of supermarket wine on the counter. "Jessica, you finally made it," Emma said, her voice carrying the slight edge I'd learned to recognize as the precursor to passive-aggressive comments. "I was just telling Mom and Dad about my promotion. Senior Marketing Director at Apex Innovations. Can you believe it?" I could, in fact, believe it. Emma had only joined the company 4 months prior with no marketing experience, but her college roommate's father was the CEO. Still, I plastered on a smile. "Congratulations, Emma. That's wonderful news. We're so proud," my mother gushed, touching Emma's arm. "She's going to be managing a team of 15 people. My recent promotion to senior financial analyst after 5 years of exemplary performance had earned me a quick, "That's nice, dear" phone call. The dining room table was set beautifully, with my grandmother Margaret already seated at one end. Her warm smile provided instant comfort as she patted the chair beside her, saving me from having to sit directly across from Emma. "Jessica," she said warmly, "tell me about that community financial literacy program you started. It sounds wonderful." Before I could answer, my father interrupted with a loud tap on his glass. "Before we eat, I want to toast Emma's incredible achievement. From struggling to find her path to senior marketing director, this calls for champagne." As he disappeared into the kitchen, my mother leaned toward Emma. "Tell Jessica and Michael your other news." Emma's smile widened. "I'm putting in an offer on a condo. It's in that luxury high-rise downtown, 2 bedrooms, concierge service, rooftop pool. It's perfect." "How exciting," I said, genuinely curious. I didn't realize marketing directors at Apex earned enough for luxury condos downtown. The starting salary for her position was substantial but not enough for the building she was describing in today's market. Emma's smile faltered slightly. Well, Mom and Dad are helping with the down payment. Just a little boost to get me established. A little boost likely meant at least $100,000 in the neighborhood she was describing. I felt Michael tense beside me but maintained my composure as my father returned with champagne. The conversation throughout dinner followed the established pattern, Emma dominating with stories about her new position, my parents hanging on her every word, and my contributions to the conversation being quickly redirected back to Emma. Michael attempted several times to highlight my accomplishments, only to be politely acknowledged, then ignored. Did you know Jessica's financial literacy program for underprivileged teens was featured in the Wall Street Journal last month? He asked during a rare lull. That's nice, my father said without looking up from his plate. Emma, tell Michael about your new company car. My grandmother caught my eye across the table, her expression communicating silent support. I pushed mashed potatoes around my plate, wondering why I continued to subject myself to these dynamics. As my mother cleared the dinner plates and brought out pumpkin pie, my father cleared his throat again. We have another announcement to make, he said, reaching for my mother's hand. As you know, we've been thinking about our estate planning. My stomach tightened. I hadn't known they were discussing estate planning. We've decided to gift the Naples property to Emma, my father continued. With her new position and condo, she'll be entertaining clients and colleagues. The vacation home will be perfect for corporate retreats and networking. The vacation home, the one I'd spent countless weekends helping renovate, the one my father had repeatedly said would stay in the family for everyone to enjoy. The one Emma had visited exactly once. I don't understand, I managed, my voice barely audible. Your sister deserves it, my father said firmly, raising his glass in another toast to Emma. She's worked so hard to get where she is. My mother nodded enthusiastically. And now she'll be able to use it properly for her career advancement. Isn't that wonderful? Emma beamed, either oblivious to or unconcerned by my distress. I'm thinking of redecorating completely. Maybe a coastal modern vibe instead of that traditional style. The traditional style I had carefully selected and implemented over 3 years of weekend work. I felt Michael's hand on my knee under the table, a gentle squeeze of support. The room seemed to tilt slightly as decades of inequity crystallized in that moment. The vacation home wasn't just a property, it represented years of my unrecognized contributions, my perpetually secondary status in the family, and the final confirmation that this pattern would never change. Excuse me, I said quietly, standing up. I need a moment. In the upstairs bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. What was I doing here? Year after year, hoping for different results. The definition of insanity, according to Einstein. On my way back downstairs, I passed my father's office. The door was ajar, and I noticed a folder on his desk labeled Naples Property Transfer. Something compelled me to look inside. There I found not only the paperwork for transferring the vacation home to Emma, but also documents showing they had already gifted her $200,000 for her condo down payment, far more than I had suspected and significantly more than they had claimed they could afford to help me with when I bought my modest Brooklyn apartment. But it was another document that made my blood run cold, a bank statement showing irregular transfers to an offshore account I recognized from my work in financial compliance. I knew exactly what these transactions represented, and the knowledge formed a hard knot in my stomach. When I returned to the dining room, Emma was describing her plans for a New Year's party at her new vacation home, complete with hired staff and professional decorators. My parents were enraptured, while my grandmother watched me with concern. I think we should go, I whispered to Michael, who nodded immediately. So soon? My mother asked, as we made our excuses. But we haven't even had coffee yet. Jessica probably has some spreadsheet to work on, Emma said with a laugh. Always the responsible one. My father barely looked up as we left, and my mother's goodbye hug was perfunctory at best. Only my grandmother Margaret walked us to the door, holding my hands tightly in hers. This isn't right, she whispered. Call me tomorrow. In the car, Michael waited until we were on the highway before speaking. Are you okay? No, I said honestly. I don't think I've been okay for a very long time, but I think I'm finally ready to do something about it. Have you ever been pushed to your breaking point by family injustice? The holidays can bring out painful dynamics we normally try to ignore. If you're finding this story resonates with your own experiences, take a deep breath with me. We're about to dive into what happened next. And trust me, it's going to get intense. Working in financial compliance had taught me to recognize patterns others missed. For years, I had noticed inconsistencies in my father's business dealings, casual comments about creative accounting, references to clients paying in cash, and the conspicuous absence of certain projects from official records. I had dismissed these observations, unwilling to consider their implications. But the offshore account statements I glimpsed that Thanksgiving night confirmed what I had subconsciously suspected. My father was engaged in systematic tax fraud through his construction business. He was underreporting income, funneling money through shell companies, and maintaining separate books for certain cash-heavy projects. The Monday after Thanksgiving, I sat in my office staring at my computer screen without seeing it. The knowledge I possessed was both power and burden. As someone who worked in financial compliance, I had a professional obligation to report suspected fraud. As a daughter, I felt conflicted about using this information against my own family. I called my grandmother, Margaret, that evening. "I need to tell you something," I said, "but I'm afraid of what might happen if I do." "Jessica," she replied, her voice steady, "I've watched you compromise yourself for this family for 29 years. Whatever it is, I'm listening." I explained what I had discovered, careful to speak in generalities rather than specifics that might implicate her if the situation escalated. "I'm not surprised," she said after a long pause. "There's something you should know about your father." She proceeded to tell me a family history I had never heard. My father had done something similar to his younger brother, my Uncle James, decades ago. They had inherited a small family business from my grandfather, which my father had systematically taken control of before pushing James out entirely. The brothers hadn't spoken in over 30 years. "History repeats itself," Margaret said softly. "Your father was the Emma in his family. He got everything while James was expected to understand and accept less. Now he's recreating that pattern with you girls." This revelation settled something within me. The pattern wouldn't change without intervention, and I was uniquely positioned to break the cycle. Over the next 3 weeks, I methodically gathered evidence. My background gave me the knowledge to document the fraud properly, identifying specific instances, calculating approximate amounts, and organizing the information so it would be compelling to authorities if necessary. I wasn't certain I would take that step, but I needed the option. I also created a detailed financial analysis of the disparate treatment between Emma and myself, every gift, investment, payment, and property spanning our entire lives. The total was staggering. Over $350,000 more had been given to Emma when accounting for education, vehicles, housing assistance, cash gifts, and now the vacation property valued at approximately $425,000. I consulted discreetly with Taylor Westfield, a law school friend who specialized in family law and financial disputes. I presented the situation as a hypothetical case, careful not to reveal identifying details. "Your hypothetical person has several options," Taylor advised. "They could pursue a civil claim for unjust enrichment or breach of promise regarding the vacation property. They could use the tax information as leverage for a private settlement. Or they could report the tax situation to authorities anonymously, separate from any family financial resolution." I thanked her for her insights, still uncertain which path I would choose. Meanwhile, my grandmother Margaret suffered a minor heart episode the week before Christmas. Though she recovered quickly, the incident underscored the precious and limited nature of time. I had spent decades hoping for recognition and fairness that never arrived. How much more time would I waste? "Life is too short for this," Margaret told me from her hospital bed. "I've been silent too long watching how they've treated you. Don't make my mistake." Her words crystallized my decision. I would confront my parents at the upcoming Christmas gathering, not out of vengeance, but in pursuit of justice and, hopefully, healing. I prepared meticulous documentation, organized into clear, irrefutable evidence of both the tax fraud and the financial favoritism. Michael worried about the potential fallout but supported my need for resolution. Just remember, he said, as we finalized my approach, you can't control how they'll respond. You can only control your actions and reactions. I know, I replied. I'm not expecting a miracle. I just need to speak my truth after all these years of silence. The night before Christmas Eve, I carefully packed the documents into my briefcase, along with a USB drive containing digital copies. Whatever happened next would change our family forever. But the status quo had become unbearable. Sometimes breakdown must precede breakthrough. I wonder how many of you have reached that critical decision point in your own families, that moment when you realize you must speak your truth, even knowing it might shatter everything familiar. The hardest part isn't gathering courage for that first conversation. It's preparing yourself for the aftermath. Let me tell you what happened when I finally confronted my family with the truth. Christmas Eve at the Addams family home had always been a picture-perfect affair. My mother's immaculate decorations, carefully selected gifts, and traditional dinner created a Norman Rockwell scene that masked the dysfunction beneath. This year, the familiar trappings felt like props in a play I was finally ready to stop performing. Michael and I arrived precisely at 4 o'clock. The house was already filled with extended family, my father's brother-in-law, Frank, and his wife, Patricia, my mother's sister, Caroline, and her husband, Robert, several cousins, and of course, Emma holding court in the living room, describing her plans for her vacation home to captivated relatives. My grandmother Margaret sat quietly by the fireplace, her knowing eyes meeting mine as I entered. The slight nod she gave me provided the last bit of courage I needed. Dinner proceeded with excruciating normalcy. Emma dominated the conversation with stories about her new promotion, while my father beamed with pride. I noticed my Aunt Caroline watching the dynamic with a furrowed brow, occasionally glancing between Emma and me with what appeared to be dawning comprehension. After dinner, as the family moved to the living room for coffee and dessert, I approached my father. Dad, could I speak with you privately for a moment? I have some questions about taxes and investments I could use your expertise on. He looked surprised. I rarely asked for his advice, but nodded. Sure, sweetheart. Let's use my study. Once inside the wood-paneled room that had always intimidated me as a child, I closed the door and took a deep breath. I'm not actually here to ask for advice, I began, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm here to discuss something important about our family. My father settled into his leather chair, looking mildly curious but not concerned. What's on your mind? I placed my briefcase on his desk and removed the first folder. I want to talk about the pattern of financial favoritism toward Emma that's existed our entire lives. I've documented every instance I could verify. His expression shifted from curiosity to annoyance. Not this again, Jessica. We've told you. Please, I interrupted, something I'd rarely dared to do. Look at the numbers first. I opened the folder, revealing meticulously organized spreadsheets detailing financial gifts, support, and investments made for each daughter. The bottom line was highlighted. A $347,520 discrepancy in Emma's favor, not including the vacation home valued at approximately $425,000. His face reddened. This is ridiculous. You're counting pennies and creating problems where there are none. Your mother and I have supported both our daughters as we saw fit. That's just it, Dad. You've supported Emma as you saw fit, and left me to fend for myself. I'm not asking for handouts, I'm asking for acknowledgement of the inequity and some attempt at fairness. Life isn't fair, Jessica. He snapped, standing abruptly. Emma needs more help. She always has. Why? I asked. The simple question hanging between us. Why does she need more help? Because she's never been held accountable? Because you've taught her that incompetence is rewarded, while competence is taken for granted? The door opened, and my mother entered, concern etched on her face. What's going on? We're about to open presents. My father gestured angrily at the papers. Jessica's created some ridiculous accounting of who got what, playing the victim again. It's not ridiculous, Mom, I said quietly. It's factual. And it's not just about money, it's about recognition, appreciation, and basic fairness. My mother glanced at the spreadsheets, then dismissed them with a wave. We've always done our best for both of you girls. If we've helped Emma more financially, it's because she needed it. You've always been so capable, Jessica. Being capable shouldn't mean being punished, I replied. My competence has been used against me my entire life. My father scoffed. This is absurd. If you're so concerned about money, this isn't about money, I interrupted again. It's about the pattern it represents. The vacation home was the last straw. I spent 3 years helping renovate it, believing it would remain in the family for everyone, only to have you gift it solely to Emma without even discussing it with me. Your sister deserves it, my father repeated the phrase that had haunted me since Thanksgiving. She'll use it properly for her career. I took a deep breath and opened the second folder. There's something else we need to discuss. I laid out the evidence of tax fraud I had compiled offshore accounts, discrepancies in reported income, cash transactions without proper documentation. I had been careful to include only information that could be legally obtained by an ordinary person with access to family papers. Nothing that would suggest I had used my professional position improperly. My father's face drained of color. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Where did you get this?" my father demanded, his voice dangerously low. "From documents in this house," I answered truthfully. "I've suspected for years, but I never wanted to confirm it. I'm not here to threaten you, Dad. I'm here because this family needs honesty if we're ever going to heal." "This is how you repay everything we've done for you?" he shouted, standing so abruptly his chair crashed against the bookcase. "By digging through my private papers and making accusations? What have you done for me, exactly?" I asked quietly. "Besides, teach me that my worth in this family is conditional while Emma's is absolute?" The study door flew open, and Emma burst in, clearly having overheard the raised voices. "What's going on? Are you trying to ruin Christmas, Jessica?" As usual, before I could respond, my father spoke, his voice tight with rage. "Your sister is threatening to report me to the IRS if we don't give her money." "That is not what I said," I corrected firmly. "I haven't threatened anything. I'm asking for acknowledgement of the unequal treatment and some attempt to address it." "You're jealous," Emma accused, her face contorting. "You've always been jealous of me. Just because Mom and Dad love me more?" "They don't love you more, Emma," I interrupted, my voice breaking slightly. "They enable you more. There's a difference." The commotion had attracted attention. Aunt Caroline appeared in the doorway, followed by Uncle Robert and my grandmother. "What's happening?" Caroline asked, looking between our tense faces. Emma immediately launched into her victim narrative. "Jessica's trying to blackmail Dad for money because she's jealous of my success and the vacation house." "That is not true," I stated firmly. I turned to the assembled family members. "I've spent my entire life being treated as less valuable than Emma. I've documented a financial disparity of over $300,000 in support and gifts, not including the vacation home that I helped renovate for 3 years, which they just gave to Emma without discussion." "Jessica, this is a private family matter," my mother hissed. "No, Diana," my grandmother Margaret spoke up unexpectedly. "This has festered in private long enough. I've watched for years as you and Richard favored one child over the other. It wasn't right then, and it isn't right now." A stunned silence followed her words. My grandmother had never directly confronted her daughter about her parenting before. Aunt Caroline stepped further into the room, her expression troubled. "Is this true? About the financial disparity?" My father attempted to regain control. "Caroline, this doesn't concern you." "Actually, it does," Caroline interrupted. "As your financial advisor, I've wondered for years where certain funds were going. And as Jessica's aunt, I've noticed how differently you treat your daughters." "I'd like to see these documents," Uncle Robert said, his legal background evident in his measured tone. "This is ridiculous," Emma cried. "They're helping me because I need it. Jessica has always been fine on her own." "Being self-sufficient shouldn't be punished," Aunt Caroline remarked, examining the spreadsheets I had compiled. "These numbers are troubling, Richard." The next hour passed in a blur of accusations, revelations, and long-buried truths surfacing. The extended family largely split along predictable lines, some defending my parents' right to distribute their assets however they chose, others expressing concern about the extreme imbalance and its psychological impact. Emma oscillated between tearful victim and venomous accuser. claiming I was destroying the family out of jealousy and resentment. When that didn't garner the usual level of sympathy, she stormed out, slamming the front door so hard that an ornament fell from the Christmas tree. By the time the extended family departed, Christmas Eve celebrations thoroughly derailed, my parents had retreated to their bedroom without resolution. I sat in the living room with my grandmother, Michael, Aunt Caroline, and Uncle Robert. "What do you want to happen now, Jessica?" Uncle Robert asked gently. "I want acknowledgement of the pattern," I replied. "I want some attempt at equity, and I want them to understand how deeply this has affected me." "And the tax information?" He pressed carefully. "I have no desire to report my own father to authorities," I said truthfully. "But I'm also not willing to continue pretending everything is fine. Something needs to change." Around midnight, my father emerged, looking haggard but composed. "We need to talk," he said. "Not tonight, but soon. I'll have my lawyer contact you after the holidays." It wasn't the heartfelt reconciliation part of me had hoped for, but it was an acknowledgement that the status quo had been irrevocably disrupted. As Michael and I prepared to leave, my mother appeared briefly, her eyes red-rimmed. "I never meant to hurt you," she whispered, not quite meeting my gaze. "I know," I replied. "But you did. For years." In the car, Michael held my hand tightly. "Are you okay?" "No," I answered honestly. "But I think someday I might be." If you've ever had to speak a difficult truth to your family, you know that moment of both terror and relief when everything is finally out in the open. The confrontation is just the beginning. Stay with me as I share how our family navigated the explosive aftermath of that Christmas Eve, including some unexpected allies and painful revelations that changed everything. The week between Christmas and New Year's passed in a strange limbo of silence and fury. Emma launched a full-scale campaign to discredit me, sending lengthy text messages to extended family members, portraying herself as the victim of my jealousy and greed. She claimed I was trying to steal her house and destroy the family because I couldn't handle her success. My parents maintained radio silence toward me while apparently speaking regularly with Emma. Through my grandmother, Margaret, I learned they were consulting with their lawyer about how to handle the situation. "They think I'm bluffing," I told Michael as we sat in our Brooklyn apartment on New Year's Eve, opting for a quiet night in rather than the celebration we'd originally planned. "They think if they ignore me long enough, I'll back down like I always have." "Will you?" he asked gently. I considered the question seriously. "No, not this time. This isn't about money, it's about finally being seen and valued in my own family." On January 3rd, I received an unexpected call from my Aunt Caroline. "I've been going through some old financial records," she said without preamble. "The disparities you identified are actually worse than your documentation showed. There are transfers and gifts you weren't aware of." "I'm not surprised," I replied. "But thank you for telling me. I've always suspected the imbalance," she continued, "but seeing it quantified was illuminating. I want you to know that not everyone in the family agrees with how you've been treated." Her support meant more than I could express. The following evening, my phone rang at 11:30 p.m. My father's name appeared on the screen. "Jessica," he said, his voice rough. "We need to talk. Tomorrow. In person." We arranged to meet at a neutral location, a private room at his lawyer's office in Hartford. I brought Michael and, at my request, Aunt Caroline attended as a family intermediary. My parents arrived with their lawyer, Harold Grossman, a stern-looking man in his 60s. Emma came separately, her eyes puffy from crying, shooting accusatory glances my way. The meeting began with tense formality as Mr. Grossman outlined my parents' position. They acknowledged some financial disparity between their daughters, but maintained their right to distribute their assets as they saw fit. They would consider a gesture of goodwill if I would sign an agreement never to disclose or act on any financial information I had obtained. "This isn't about buying my silence," I said firmly. "This is about acknowledging a lifetime pattern of favoritism and taking steps toward fairness." Emma could no longer contain herself. "This is extortion. You're just jealous that Mom and Dad love me enough to help me succeed, while you've had to work for everything." "Emma," Caroline interjected, "do you hear what you just said? You've had to work for everything." "That's exactly Jessica's point." Emma blinked, momentarily thrown off her script. My father looked uncomfortable. "Perhaps we should discuss specific numbers," Mr. Grossman suggested, clearly trying to reduce an emotional family matter to a financial transaction. "Before we do," I said, "I'd like to understand why. Why has this pattern existed for as long as I can remember? Why was I expected to be self-sufficient while Emma received endless support? Why was my success taken for granted while her minimal efforts were celebrated?" An uncomfortable silence followed until my mother surprisingly broke it. "You never needed us," she said quietly. "From the time you were a toddler, you were independent, determined. Emma was different, more fragile, more emotional. She needed constant reassurance, constant support." "So I was punished for being capable?" I asked. "Don't you see how that sends the message that the only way to get your love and attention was to fail?" My mother looked stricken. My father shifted uncomfortably. "We never meant to punish you," he said. "We just thought you were fine. You were always fine." "I wasn't fine," I replied, my voice finally breaking. I was a child who learned that the only way to matter in this family was to never need anything. Do you have any idea what that does to someone? Emma began crying again, but for once, my parents didn't immediately rush to comfort her. A heavy silence filled the room. "Perhaps," Aunt Caroline suggested gently, "we should adjourn for today and resume when emotions aren't so raw." We agreed to meet again in a week. As we were gathering our things, my father pulled me aside. "The tax situation," he said quietly. "How much do you know?" "Enough," I replied. "But that was never my focus. I only included it because I needed you to take me seriously for once." He nodded slowly. "We'll talk next week." The following days brought unexpected developments. Uncle Robert called to offer his services as a mediator. Cousins reached out expressing support and sharing their own observations of the favoritism they'd witnessed over the years. Even my father's estranged brother James contacted me after hearing about the situation through family channels, sharing his own painful history with my father. Emma, meanwhile, escalated her attacks, creating what my therapist, Dr. Reed, called a smear campaign typical in family systems when someone challenges the established dynamic. She claimed I was mentally unstable, financially desperate, and motivated by pure jealousy. Her narrative shifted depending on her audience. To some family members, she portrayed herself as the confused victim. To others, she was righteously angry at my betrayal. My grandmother Margaret provided steady support, inviting me to her home for tea and wisdom. "This isn't just about money or property," she observed. "This is about being seen and valued. Whatever happens with the legal and financial aspects, Jessica, don't lose sight of what you're really seeking." A week later, we reconvened at the lawyer's office. Something had shifted in my father's demeanor. He seemed less defensive, more reflective. My mother appeared visibly anxious. "I've been doing some thinking," my father began without preamble, "and some research into my own family history. My brother James, you've met him recently. I understand." I nodded, surprised he knew about our conversation. "The pattern you described, of favoring one child over the other, it's what my father did to me and James. I was the favored one," he admitted. "And I never questioned it because it benefited me. I think I may have unconsciously recreated that dynamic with you and Emma." The admission hung in the air, momentous in its simplicity. Emma stared at our father in disbelief. "What are you saying? That you're going to give in to her demands? After everything she's done to tear apart this family?" "Emma," my mother said with uncharacteristic firmness, "Jessica didn't tear apart this family. She pointed out cracks that have existed for decades. Cracks we refuse to see." Emma burst into tears. But this time, the tears didn't immediately activate my parents' protective response. For perhaps the first time, they let her experience her emotions without rushing to shield her from discomfort. Over the next several hours, we negotiated a framework for moving forward. My parents acknowledged the financial disparity and agreed to a plan that would address the imbalance over time. The vacation home would be placed in a family trust accessible to both daughters, with specific usage guidelines. They also committed to family therapy to address the deeper emotional issues. The tax situation was addressed separately in a private conversation with my father, who agreed to work with a specialized accountant to rectify past irregularities through voluntary disclosure programs. As we prepared to leave, my mother approached me hesitantly. "I never realized," she said, "how much my own upbringing influenced how I parented. My mother always favored me over my sister. I thought it was normal. I'm sorry, Jessica." It wasn't a perfect resolution. Decades of ingrained patterns wouldn't dissolve overnight. Emma remained resistant, alternating between tearful accusations and stony silence. My parents struggled to implement new behaviors consistently, but for the first time, the invisible rules governing our family were being openly examined rather than blindly followed. The most profound change occurred not in our legal agreements but in small daily interactions. My father called to ask about my work projects. My mother sent thoughtful texts rather than forwarding Emma's news. They began to really see me perhaps, for the first time. By spring 2019, our family had settled into a new normal. The legal agreements were finalized. The vacation home was placed in a family trust with equal access for both daughters. My parents established equivalent investment accounts for Emma and me, and a portion of my father's business shares were transferred to me to balance previous gifts to Emma. The financial resolution, while important, was secondary to the psychological shift occurring within our family system. For Emma, the transition was especially difficult. Having been raised with the expectation that her needs would always take precedence, she initially interpreted equitable treatment as punishment. "You've turned them against me," she accused during a tense family therapy session in April. "They barely help me at all anymore." "They still help you," I pointed out gently, "just not at the expense of also supporting me when appropriate." Dr. Marquez, our family therapist, was skilled at identifying the patterns that had defined our family for decades. "Emma," she observed, "your distress seems to spike not when your needs aren't met, but when Jessica's needs are being considered equally. That's something worth exploring." My father's journey was perhaps the most surprising. One evening in May, he asked if I would meet him for dinner alone, something that had rarely happened throughout my life. Over steaks at his favorite restaurant, he spoke with unusual vulnerability. "I've been thinking about my relationship with James, my brother. The parallels are uncomfortable. My father favored me unquestionably, and I never questioned it because it benefited me. I lost my brother because of it." He sipped his water before continuing. "I don't want to lose you the same way. And I'm realizing how close I came to doing exactly that." "What changed?" I asked. "Why now, after all these years?" He considered the question carefully. "Partly seeing the evidence laid out so clearly. Partly your grandmother's intervention, she's been talking sense to your mother and me for months. And partly seeing myself through your eyes. I didn't like what I saw." These moments of insight didn't erase the past, but they created possibility for a different future. My mother's transformation was more subtle but equally meaningful. She began asking questions about my life, my work, my relationship with Michael, showing genuine interest rather than perfunctory attention before returning to Emma's latest drama. "I never realized how automatic it had become," she admitted during a mother-daughter lunch in June, "focusing on Emma's needs to the exclusion of yours. It wasn't conscious, which makes it worse in some ways." Emma's journey toward awareness proceeded in fits and starts. In July, she impulsively quit her marketing director position after a minor criticism from her boss, expecting our parents to cover her expenses until she found something new. To her shock, they suggested she use her emergency fund, the one they had helped her establish, as part of our new financial arrangements. "But I need help now," she protested during a family dinner. "You have resources," my father said gently. "We believe you're capable of handling this." Emma's expression in that moment was complicated frustration mixed with a flickering of something that might have been pride. For perhaps the first time, our parents were treating her as a competent adult rather than a perpetual child in need of rescue. The vacation property became an unexpected catalyst for healing. In August, Emma and I spent a weekend there together, our first time sharing the space since the redistribution. Initially awkward, the neutral territory gradually allowed for conversations impossible to have elsewhere. "I never understood why you were so angry," Emma admitted as we sat on the back porch watching the sunset. "From my perspective, it seemed like you had everything: the grades, the career, the stability. I didn't see what was happening with Mom and Dad because it benefited me. I was angry, I acknowledged. But I was also hurt. It wasn't about the money or things, it was about feeling valued. By fall, my grandmother Margaret moved into a condo closer to my Brooklyn apartment, a decision supported by a portion of my settlement funds. Our weekly dinners became a cherished routine, her wisdom continuing to guide me through the evolving family dynamic. "I see changes in all of you," she observed one evening. "Your parents are trying imperfectly, but sincerely. Emma is beginning to stand on her own feet. And you, my dear, are learning that being strong doesn't mean having to stand alone." In October, Michael proposed during a weekend hike in the Catskills, presenting a vintage emerald ring that had belonged to his grandmother. The moment was perfect in its simplicity, no grand gestures or social media spectacle, just an honest question and my joyful acceptance. When I called my parents with the news, my father's response caught me off guard. "Jessica, that's wonderful news. We'd like to host an engagement dinner for you both if that's something you'd welcome." The gesture acknowledging my milestone with the same enthusiasm they would have shown for Emma's meant more than they could know. The engagement dinner in November brought together both our families, including Michael's parents who had traveled from Chicago. My father made a toast that brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "To Jessica and Michael," he said, raising his glass. "Jessica, your strength, intelligence, and integrity have always been extraordinary. I haven't always acknowledged that properly, but I see it clearly now. Michael, you're a fortunate man to have her as your partner, and we're fortunate to welcome you to our family." Emma's reaction to my engagement revealed her ongoing journey. Initial congratulations followed by a private moment of tearful confession. "Part of me is still jealous," she admitted with unusual self-awareness. "Not of Michael or your relationship, but of how together your life seems. I'm trying to work on that in therapy." Her honesty, however painful, represented progress. For perhaps the first time, she was acknowledging her feelings rather than manipulating others to accommodate them. By December 2019, exactly 1 year after the confrontation that had changed everything, our family gathered for Christmas Eve. The atmosphere was markedly different, more authentic, less performative. Tensions still existed. Old patterns occasionally resurfaced, but the framework for addressing them had fundamentally changed. Emma arrived with news of her own, a new job at a smaller marketing firm where she would have to prove herself without connections, and a modest apartment she had found without parental assistance. "It's nothing fancy," she said with a touch of pride, "but it's mine. Really mine." My father, meanwhile, had completed the voluntary disclosure process regarding his tax irregularities, facing financial penalties but avoiding more severe consequences. The experience had humbled him in ways that our confrontation alone might not have achieved. As we exchanged gifts thoughtful and relatively equal in value, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The family before me was imperfect, still healing, still learning, but fundamentally transformed from the system that had caused so much pain. Not through dramatic gestures, but through the harder work of daily awareness and consistent change. Michael squeezed my hand under the table, a silent acknowledgement of how far we had come. The ring on my finger caught the light from the Christmas tree, a symbol not just of our commitment to each other, but of the possibility of building a family dynamic different from the one I had grown up with. That night, as snow began to fall outside my parents' house, I realized that the true resolution wasn't in the legal agreements or financial redistribution. It was in the broken patterns, the new awareness, and the tentative but genuine connections replacing decades of inequality and unspoken resentment. In standing up for myself, I had created space for all of us to become better versions of ourselves, a gift far more valuable than any property or inheritance. "You may now kiss the bride." Michael's lips meet mine as applause erupts around us. The 15th of May 2021, our wedding day has arrived with perfect spring weather and a gathering of loved ones who have witnessed our journey. The ceremony takes place in the garden of a historic estate in the Hudson Valley, with my grandmother Margaret beaming from her seat of honor in the front row. At 84, her health has stabilized, her eyes still bright with the wisdom that guided me through the darkest periods of family conflict. As we move to the reception, I'm struck by the transformed family dynamics playing out around us. My parents, Richard and Diana Adams, are gracious hosts who have respected our wishes for the wedding rather than imposing their preferences. They've contributed financially without attempting to control the proceedings, a balance that would have been unimaginable 3 years ago. Emma serves as my maid of honor, a role she fulfills with surprising grace and genuine support. Our relationship has evolved into something I never thought possible, a friendship between equals rather than a competition for parental attention. "Your dress is perfect," she whispers during a quiet moment between photographs. "You look radiant, Jess." The compliment comes without the subtle undermining that once characterized her praise, reflecting her ongoing work in therapy and personal growth. During the reception dinner, my father rises for his toast, his expression open and vulnerable in a way that still feels new. "When Jessica was a little girl," he begins, "she would solve puzzles meant for children twice her age. She would tackle projects with quiet determination while the rest of us were distracted by louder, more demanding matters." He pauses, meeting my gaze directly. "I didn't always see her clearly then. But I see her now, her intelligence, her integrity, her compassionate heart. Michael, you're marrying a remarkable woman. And Jessica, your mother and I couldn't be prouder of the person you've become." Tears prick my eyes as he raises his glass in a toast that acknowledges me fully, not as the perpetually self-sufficient daughter who needs nothing, but as a woman deserving of recognition and celebration. Later, during the father-daughter dance, he whispers, "Thank you for not giving up on me. On us. We're still learning." I reply honestly. Yes, he agrees. We are. My mother has found her own path toward healing our relationship. She approaches me during a quiet moment on the terrace, away from the music and laughter. "I was thinking about your childhood bedroom today," she says. "How plain it was compared to Emma's. I never saw it then, how every small inequality added up to one big message about who mattered more." She takes my hand. "I wish I could go back and do it differently." "We can't change the past," I tell her. "But we're changing the future. That matters more." Emma's journey has perhaps been the most challenging. Without the constant safety net of parental rescuing, she's had to develop genuine competence and resilience. After initially struggling with the new family dynamic, she found unexpected strength within herself. She now works for a small marketing agency where her performance, not connections, determines her success. She dates more thoughtfully, no longer using relationships as sources of financial stability. Most significantly, she's developed the capacity for self-reflection that allows for authentic connection. "Sometimes I still get jealous," she admitted during a sister's lunch last month. "But now I recognize it and work through it instead of expecting everyone else to fix my feelings." The property that once symbolized our family's dysfunction, the Florida vacation home, has become a shared retreat governed by clear, fair guidelines. Emma and I have even spent several weekends there together, slowly building the sisterhood that favoritism once made impossible. As Michael and I share our first dance as husband and wife, I catch sight of my grandmother Margaret watching us with tears in her eyes. Later, she pulls me into a gentle embrace. "You've changed the pattern," she whispers. "For generations, this family created golden children and scapegoats. You broke that cycle." 3 months after our wedding, Michael and I discover I'm pregnant, news we decide to share with both families during Thanksgiving dinner. The symmetry isn't lost on me announcing our joy at the same holiday gathering where, 3 years earlier, I had reached my breaking point. As we gather around my parents' dining room table, the same physical space but an emotionally transformed environment, I notice the subtle differences that reflect our family's journey. The seating arrangement no longer segregates us into obvious factions. The conversation flows more democratically, with each person given space to speak and be heard. After the main course, Michael squeezes my hand under the table, our signal. I take a deep breath and share our news. "Michael and I are expecting a baby in June," I announce, watching as joy spreads across the faces around the table. My mother's hands fly to her mouth in delighted surprise. My father's eyes grow suspiciously bright. But it's Emma's reaction that moves me most, genuine happiness unmarred by the competitive comparison that would once have been automatic. "I'm going to be an aunt," she exclaims, rushing to embrace me. Later, as we enjoy pumpkin pie, my father raises his glass in a toast that would have been unimaginable 3 years ago. "To Jessica and Michael," he says, his voice steady with emotion. As you begin your own family, may you carry forward the lessons we've all learned about what truly matters. And to my grandchild, who will grow up in a family where every member is valued equally and loved uniquely. After dinner, I find a moment alone on the back porch, my hand resting lightly on my still flat stomach. Michael joins me, wrapping his arm around my shoulders. Happy, he asks. Yes, I answer truthfully. Not because everything's perfect, it isn't, but because it's real now. No more pretending. As we drive home that night, I reflect on the journey that brought us here. The confrontation at Christmas 3 years ago wasn't really about money or property. It was about being seen, being valued, being treated with basic fairness. In demanding those things not just for myself but for the health of our entire family, I changed a multi-generational pattern that might otherwise have continued indefinitely. For my child growing up in this imperfect but healing family, the inheritance won't be measured in dollars or property. It will be the understanding that their worth isn't conditional on performance or compliance. It will be the knowledge that speaking difficult truths, however painful initially, creates the possibility for authentic connection. And it will be the lived example that patterns can be broken and new, healthier ones created in their place. That night, as Michael sleeps beside me, I make a silent promise to our unborn child. You will be loved for who you are, not for what you achieve. You will be supported without being controlled. You will be seen, truly seen from the very beginning. In standing up for myself, I created something more valuable than any material inheritance. A family defined by equity rather than favoritism, by honest communication rather than comfortable deception, by the courage to grow rather than the safety of familiar dysfunction. That is the true legacy I'll pass on, not just to my child, but to all the generations that follow. Have you ever had to confront a painful family pattern to create change? Family dynamics like these often continue for generations until someone finds the courage to speak up. If this story resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your experiences might help someone else find the strength to address inequality in their own family. Don't forget to subscribe for more authentic family stories. And hit that like button if you found value in my journey. Thank you for witnessing my story of finding fairness and healing. Sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the most beautiful transformations.